You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, you were just in the courtroom where Donald Trump's attorney was making his case to the DC Court of Appeals that Donald Trump can't be prosecuted because he's got full immunity. There was this pretty amazing back and forth that's gone viral by now, where the judge, one of the judges on this panel, basically asks whether that means a president can have his political opponent assassinated and still not face criminal conviction. Can you speak about that moment? Did it feel like the Trump team basically lost the judges during that line of questioning?
Yeah, Brian, it was pretty jarring to hear an attorney representing a former president of the United States who all but conceded that, yeah, a president could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political opponent. A president could sell pardons. A president could sell military secrets to the enemy. And unless the House of Representatives impeached him and the Senate convicted him on the articles of impeachment, he could never be prosecuted for those crimes. It was pretty alarming. And I will say, John Sauer, the criminal defense attorney representing Donald Trump in today's appellate argument, tried to wiggle out of answering the question every which way. And Judge Florence Pan, who was questioning him about it, would not relent. She insisted that he answer the questions. And it was pretty alarming when he basically conceded that, except under a very narrow set of facts and circumstances, basically a president can do whatever he wants, including use the military to order the assassination of a political opponent, and he can't be prosecuted.
Glenn, if Trump's lawyers are arguing that a president is covered by complete immunity, even if, he has his political opponent assassinated, are they not also de facto suggesting that Joe Biden could literally do that to Donald Trump and that Trump has no recourse?
Yeah, Joe Biden never has to leave office if Trump wins this argument. He's not going to win the argument. I am confident of that. But, there is this almost philosophical discussion I've been having with friends and colleagues lately. If the courts rule that Donald Trump has absolute presidential immunity and commit any and all crimes he wants, including crimes designed to unlawfully retain the power of the presidency, then the reality is America has been converted into a dictatorship. And if people had to choose a dictator, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who are you going to choose?
Right.
I know this is like an insane discussion to be having, Brian, but that's exactly where we would end up if the courts ruled Donald Trump has the absolute immunity he is seeking. But rest assured, the courts will not so hold.
Now, Trump's lawyer kept arguing that impeachment and Senate conviction are a prerequisite for a criminal conviction if, again, he had his political opponent assassinated, for example. Where did that come from? Is it laid out anywhere in the Constitution or in a criminal statute that these are the prerequisites for a president being criminally convicted?
Brian, a great question. And I think what we need to do is read the very short impeachment judgments clause, because that is where this argument had its origin. But the Constitution doesn't say anything like what Donald Trump's lawyers just tried to convince the judges it says. Here's what the impeachment judgments clause says. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But here's the big but. The person, the party, the president in this instance, who is impeached and convicted by the Senate, shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. Let's break that down into English. That clause of the Constitution says even if the president is impeached by the House and convicted on the articles of impeachment at a Senate trial, he can still be criminally prosecuted. Here's what Donald Trump's lawyers did. They took that, they turned it on its head.
Right. They reversed it and basically said that the only way that he can be prosecuted is if he's also impeached and convicted in a Senate trial. But that's not what the Constitution says at all.
Not only is it not what it says, but if the founders, if the framers, if the drafters had wanted to say the only way a president can be prosecuted is if he is impeached and convicted in the Senate, they could have said it. They didn't. They said, even if he is impeached and convicted by the Senate, he can still be prosecuted.
Right.
So I think that argument fell under the weight of its own frivolity. But here comes the fun part, Brian, because then the judges started to lob these truth and logic bombs at Donald Trump's lawyer, for example. So what you're saying by offering this impeachment first rule, this interpretation of the impeachment judgments clause that makes no sense. We're going to run with that for a minute. So if Congress decides not to impeach a president after he obviously committed crimes, that would be Congress giving immunity to the president, because you just said if he's not impeached and convicted in a Senate trial, he can never be prosecuted. So you're giving Congress the power of immunity. Or let's talk about this truth. If Congress does go about impeaching a criminal president and the president says, I resign, and therefore he can't be successfully impeached and convicted in a Senate trial, he's just taken matters into his own hands. He's given himself immunity and he can never be prosecuted. Brian, example after example of truth and logic exposed the idiocy of what Donald Trump's lawyer was arguing today.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. Glenn, I feel like I know the answer to this question, but it's worth asking. Was there any moment during the arguments where Trump's attorney did seem to score a point, or did any of the judges respond favorably at any point to any argument that was made?
I wouldn't say favorably. I think maybe the best moment he had was kind of talking about the slippery slope that could result if all of a sudden every party was always trying to prosecute the president of the other party over and over and over again. And shouldn't there be some kind of maybe qualified immunity against prosecution around the edges, way at the outer perimeter? I think there was an interesting academic discussion about that. The reality is there is no lawful authority for outer perimeter presidential immunity against prosecution. There is against civil suits if somebody tries to sue a president for some decision he took, but it just doesn't apply in the criminal context. It was an interesting argument and discussion, but at the end of the day, I don't think it is going to ultimately win on anything of substance.
And we do have a threshold to bring lawsuits against politicians. It's the criminal statute, right? Like it's the rest of the laws that everybody else has to abide by. And Donald Trump is protected in civil suits by virtue of his position, but if he breaks the law, that's not covered by his oath of office. If he goes outside of the oath of office, he's going to be susceptible to criminal prosecution for that, because in America nobody's above the law.
It's a great point. And there's another sort of truth bomb that one of the judges lobbed at the defense attorney, and he really had no comeback. She said, no, wait a minute. The president has a sworn constitutional duty to, quote, faithfully execute the laws of the country. Are you saying that he has free rein to violate all the laws of the country, even though the Constitution requires him to faithfully execute the laws of the country? That just makes no dang common sense.
Right. All right, Glenn, let's finish off with this. What is the timeline for a decision here?
So I think the institutions of government generally, certainly the judiciary, and I think the appellate courts and the trial court and even the Supreme Court appreciates the urgency of the moment, and they have begun to move at what passes for light speed by appellate court standards. I have a feeling we're going to see a decision within perhaps days or a matter of a week or two. And, then inevitably, when Donald Trump loses this issue, he will seek review in the Supreme Court. And I've said this before, Brian, if the Supreme Court is an honest broker of the law, and the word if is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, they should not accept this issue for review. Why? Because there is no constitutional principle to be decided. There is no law, no statute on the books. There is no case law, no legal precedent from any appellate court, and there is no constitutional provision that provides a president is immune from prosecution. So the Supreme Court really shouldn't take it up. Will they take it up? that's anybody's guess. They may want to, feel like they're players on this issue. They might want to just issue a Supreme Court opinion that says, yes, we affirm what the both the trial court, Judge Chutkan, and inevitably what the DC Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, the three-judge panel, will rule, that a president can be prosecuted.
Okay. Glenn, I know before we leave, I know that you wanted to talk just for a moment about the political implications of what we've seen.
I want to ask you about the politics of this. I am not a political expert. I don't play one on TV. You are a political expert. And, when I watch Donald Trump, there is a phrase that I think I understand called retail politics or retail politician, somebody who actually behaves the way we expect politicians to behave, particularly when they're running for office. Donald Trump walked into the room. I was sitting about 25 to 30 feet behind him, directly behind him in the courtroom. And he came in kind of head down. He didn't look at or engage with anybody in this packed courtroom. And he sat there with a scowl, right? That sullen, sour look on his face. The only person I saw him interact with the whole time was one of his defense attorneys, John Lauro. I didn't see him engage with anybody else. He didn't exchange a word with anybody in that room. He didn't shake a hand. I mean, to me, it seems like that is the antithesis of a politician, a retail politician, somebody who's actively running for office. Of course, that behavior that I observed is exactly the kind of behavior I observed for 30 years with criminal defendants. But it was a little bit jarring to see this person who's supposed to be this really accomplished politician acting in a way that was the opposite of what we generally see politicians doing.
Well, he's not here to be a politician. He's not here to help people. He's not here to lower costs or to make healthcare more affordable or to get people jobs. The whole point of all of this is just to protect himself legally. That's why he's here. He's upset about this, and so he's hoping to just win the presidency. And that's why, by the way, and we've spoken about this, ad nauseum, that's why he's doing all of this and seeking to delay all of his trials. He's using the presidency to try to prevent any prosecution of him. So, like, of course he doesn't look like a politician there. Of course he's not doing the regular glad handing and rubbing elbows with people, because it's not about that. He's not here for any of the right reasons. He's just here to save himself. He views the presidency as a way to just avoid any accountability for any of the actions that he's committed, for any of the crimes that he's committed. And so I think that really does help to explain, like, why he's not on the campaign trail talking about issues that actually impact people. This is a retribution tour for him. This is a way for him to try to get back at people who he feels wronged him for the crime of holding him to account for the crimes that he committed himself. And I think that really the disposition that you saw on display in the courtroom kind of is a testament to that.
And I guess I would have expected him to at least fake it a little bit. And listen, the way he looked scared. He looked defeated. Frankly, he looked petrified. I mean, the man couldn't even make eye contact with anybody but one of his own lawyers. To me, I would want to portray at least some sense of confidence. Like, listen, I've got this. I've done nothing wrong. I'm going to win these arguments and I'm going to be elected president. But he obviously is not a conventional politician. We hear that all the time. But also, I don't think he has it in him to try to fake appearing to be a politician or appearing to have any confidence in his own position. But boy, did he look like a very scared former president.
And I think this is one of those rare instances where the reality of the situation really does kind of bear down on him, and he can't fake it. He can't lie his way through making his face change when he knows what he's facing right now in this DC prosecution. So he's going through the motions here and desperately trying to delay, but the guy is backed into a corner. He knows what faces him on the other side of this, and that is, as soon as this issue of immunity is adjudicated in the appeals court and then eventually goes to the US Supreme Court, that's it. And after that, it's all systems go in terms of getting this trial in Washington, D.C. moving forward. And when it does, he's screwed at the end of it. He's going to be convicted at the end of this trial. And so, he can do whatever he can to delay this as much as he can. That's what he's doing right now. But it's a fool's errand, and this isn't really gonna bear fruit for him in any meaningful way by the end. But with that said, we will obviously continue to follow along with this trial, especially with regard to when we have some type of decision handed down by the appeals court here, which is what we're waiting on next. So for those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.